Some of the things that you use every single day could be quietly exposing you to toxins that can affect your metabolism, your gut, and your long-term health. The problem is, you're not seeing these dangers. They're part of a completely normal kitchen, and you use them in your normal routines every single day without thinking twice about them. And over time, these exposures can actually weaken your immune system. Some are even associated with DNA damage and cellular stress. I'm talking about slow, low-level cumulative exposure from things that you might have had in your kitchen for years. I'm going to show you what these hidden exposures are in your kitchen and what you can do practically to reduce your risk and increase your health. Before we go into each of these toxic exposures, it's important to understand why they matter. It's not a one-time exposure that makes a difference in terms of whether you're going to be healthier or sicker, but it's actually over time, the accumulation of these exposures can add up in ways that people don't realize. Even though there's different kinds of exposures, they all tend to converge and wreak havoc on the same systems in your body, and that is your health defenses. For example, exposures over time can trigger inflammation in your body. That's a root cause of many diseases. These toxic exposures can disrupt your gut microbiome. That's your healthy gut bacteria. And over time, these exposures can actually weaken your immune system. Some are even associated with DNA damage and cellular stress, which accelerates cellular aging. Others can affect your circulation, your blood vessels, by irritating the lining inside your blood vessels. That's called the endothelial lining. And when your endothelial lining is damaged, guess what? You don't have good blood flow. Not to your brain, not to your heart, not to your eyes, not to your great toe. Any tissue in your body doesn't get the blood flow it actually needs to work in an optimal sort of way. So I'm going to tell you about these toxic exposures in the kitchen so you know where they're coming from. And once you hear about it, it's hard to ignore. You can't unlearn what you're about to hear. Let's take a closer look. Are you ready? Let's go. The first exposure is microplastics. All right. Now think about how often you come into contact with plastic whenever you're in the kitchen. Containers, utensils, cups, plates. Most takeout food, in fact, is packaged in some sort of plastic, right? It's so common that we don't even question the fact that our food is going to be in contact with plastic. And here's what the problem is. These materials, plastic materials, aren't completely stable. Every time you heat your food in plastic, or every time you cut your food on a plastic cutting board, you're going to release hundreds, if not more, little tiny particles of microscopic plastic right into the food that you're about to eat. And that's what's called microplastics. There's a definition. A microplastic is a fragment of plastic smaller than 5 mm in size. How big is 5 mm? It's about the size of a sesame seed. So pretty small, but it can get way smaller than that. Microscopic, even down to the nanoscale level. And guess what? When you're eating your food, you're going to be eating the microplastics or nanoplastics. They enter the body after you swallow them, and now we are finding microplastics in places that we never expected before. Blood vessels, for example. One study showed microplastics were embedded in the walls of the blood vessels in patients with narrowing of their carotid arteries. That's the vessels feeding the brain. And for those people, guess what? They had a 4-fold increase in the rate of heart attack or stroke. Microplastics have been found in the brain. So many in the brain that in fact you can actually put 2 brains, one with microplastics, one without, and it would tip the scale. You can actually measure on a scale how much plastic is actually in the brain. We have found microplastics in breast milk. Think about that one for the baby. And we've also found it in other reproductive tissues like semen, testicles, and even the penis. Urologists doing surgery in the penis have taken some of the tissue, looked into the microscope, and there's plastic embedded in the penis. And they're not just passing through the body. You have to understand that it's not that you eat them and you poop them out. You eat them, they get absorbed somehow in your bloodstream, and then they lodge into organs and stick around. Biologically, that matters. These are foreign particles. They can trigger inflammation, and the plastic themselves can be made of toxic chemicals that will leach out into your tissues. Microplastics can irritate the lining of your blood vessels. That's the endothelium. I told you about that layer, that if it's irritated or damaged, critical for your circulation, you irritate that, you damage them with microplastics. Now, you're not going to get good blood flow. Remember, I just told you connected with a higher risk of heart attack or stroke, which are all caused by problems with blood vessels in those critical tissues. Where are microplastics coming from in the kitchen? some obvious sources, right? Plastic containers, bottles, utensils. But here's something you might not know. Heating the plastic like you would by microwaving a pre-made meal. Okay, nuke it in a microwave. Heating the plastic increases the release of microplastics, shedding the plastics right into your food. And there are some less obvious sources as well. For example, your dishwasher pod, right? You know those little tiny pods you put in your dishwasher? When they're breaking apart and they're spreading all the soap to clean the dishes, you know what they're also spreading? They're depositing microplastics, and residue goes right onto your clean dishes, your clean silverware, your clean cups. And guess what? Every time you eat with them, you are ingesting some of those microshed microplastic particles. Another unexpected source in the kitchen, your plastic cutting board. Now, cutting boards are really critical. I like to cook, so I have lots of cutting boards in my kitchen. All of mine are wood. And the reason is, if you have a plastic cutting board, all right, every time you cut through food on that cutting board, the friction from your knife on the plastic can release hundreds, even up to 300 in one study. Little microscopic plastic fragments that get right into your food. Remember, when you swallow them, they're going to get into your bloodstream, and then they lodge elsewhere in your organs. So these are a couple of just like places that you need to think about with microplastics. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to eliminate plastic from your kitchen completely, but it does mean that exposures are really, really common and they add up over time. What do you do? What can you do to reduce your risk? Simple things. You should reduce your exposure as much as you can. And here's how I do it. Use glass or stainless steel for storing food or liquids, okay? Instead of plastic, get those glass containers or steel containers, steel bowls, not plastic bowls, all right? And whatever you do, avoid heating food in anything that's plastic and switch out your plastic cutting boards, all right? Throw them right out. Go get a wooden board instead. It's going to be a lot better. If you're finding this helpful, make sure you've subscribed to this channel. This is exactly where I break down the science behind everyday exposures and what you can do about them, okay? The next toxic kitchen exposure you might not have expected. The exposure is to heavy metals. Now, heavy metals are naturally occurring elements like lead, arsenic, cadmium, mercury. They're actually present in the earth, okay? They're naturally found on our planet in small amounts, like we're exposed to just by being alive in the planet. They're perfectly fine. In fact, some metals are just part of our background in the natural environment. But here's the thing. When you've got repeated exposure to heavy metals, these heavy metals can become harmful because a body doesn't efficiently eliminate them. Unlike microplastics, we've actually known about heavy metals and their risk for decades. Here's what we know. It's the repeated low-level exposure over time that's dangerous. So, where in the kitchen do you find heavy metals? Let's take a look at that. One of the places you might expect the least, but actually is where you find it the most, is actually in your water supply. All right? Especially in older homes, there used to be lead in our pipes. That's a heavy metal, lead. And over time, over many years, these pipes get old and the lead leaches from the pipe, from the plumbing, right into the water. And then you're drinking that water. You're cooking with the water. No good. All right, that's one of the places. Another place you can actually find heavy metals that you might not expect is rice. Now, whether you're talking about brown rice or white rice, actually brown rice is more heavy metals than white rice. What does rice contain? Rice can contain arsenic. All right, some of it comes from the ground. Some of it actually comes from the environment. Some of it comes from contamination of the environment. But that's why you want to really rinse your rice well before you cook it. All right, so, when I am cooking rice, I'll put it into a metal bowl. I'll put it under the spigot. I will flush it with water. You'll see all this cloudy stuff come off. All right, and I keep on rinsing. I mix it with my hands until the water runs clear. Then you can actually cook it. All right, how about another food that you might have in the kitchen might contain heavy metals is chocolate. It turns out that the cacao pod from cacao trees that are actually used to make chocolate, some of them, depending on where they grow, can contain cadmium or lead. This is especially if the trees come from Central and South America, and these levels have been tested in chocolate, and it's hard to avoid. So you really want to be able to do your research to figure out what kind of chocolate you enjoy and whether or not it's been studied for heavy metals and what those levels actually are. Remember, low levels infrequently, not a big deal. It's higher levels, especially frequently, that can actually become a problem. And believe it or not, another source of heavy metals can be your spice rack, right? So, all those little tiny bottles of spices that you buy, For example, turmeric, right? Great healthy spice imported from India and Pakistan. Guess what? They have been reported to be contaminated with lead as well. Now, these toxic metals in foods can accumulate in your tissue with repeated exposure, right? Your body can eliminate some of them, but it has trouble eliminating a lot of it. And over time, when heavy metals accumulate in your brain, your kidneys, your bones, and your cardiovascular system, that can actually cause organ damage. Remember, I'm not talking about acute poisoning. That's a different thing. I'm talking about slow, low-level cumulative exposure from things that you might have had in your kitchen for years. So how do you actually reduce heavy metal exposure in your kitchen? Well, one of the simplest ways and most effective steps you can take is actually to use a certified water filter that's designed to eliminate or reduce heavy metals in your drinking water, especially if you live in an older home. That is the number one thing I would actually do. Okay, the next toxin coming up, chemical cleaners. Some of the most significant exposures in your kitchen aren't actually in your food at all. They're in how you clean your kitchen. Think about it. Cleaning products are designed to do a job that contains surfactants that can lift grease, solvents that can dissolve oils, disinfectants that can kill microbes, bacteria, and they often had added fragrances to create that smell, that clean smell. So it's intentional chemistry. Chemicals are put into these cleaning liquids or powders, and the issue is that when you use them, you are getting exposure to those chemicals. And in many cases, you're inhaling those chemicals as well. Most people don't clean their kitchen with a mask on or wearing gloves. Some people do, most people don't. And by the way, many cleaning products also can release toxic chemicals into the air called volatile organic compounds. Volatile organic compounds, VOCCs. And guess what? These toxic chemicals evaporate right into the air, the VOCCs, and then you breathe them right in. And as this is especially true if you've got sprays, these sprays that smell really good for cleaning. Again, it's not acute one-time exposure. It's repeated exposure over the time. The VOCCs, the volatile organic chemicals, can actually irritate your airways, cause inflammation. And in fact, some of these exposures have even been linked to respiratory conditions that are inflammatory like asthma. And by the way, some of these cleaning products contain chlorine-based compounds like bleach. These are strong oxidizing agents. They kill bacteria really, really well, but the chemicals also can irritate your lungs and your eyes and your skin. Disinfectant wipes and sprays, they also contain quaternary ammonium compounds. Again, these are good for cleaning, but they're also associated with airway irritation, especially if you use them a lot. And then there's the fragrances that are found in kitchen products, the counter spray that makes your counter smell really good when you're cleaning it, or the dish soap or garbage bags. That's the latest thing that I've noticed, is almost every garbage bag, smells like you're in a perfume factory. It's got some scent, lavender scent, coming out of it. And the problem is that fragrance is not a natural odor, okay? Not a natural chemical. It's a mixture of chemicals, some of which have been found to be endocrine disruptors that over time can interfere with your body's hormones. Not good. So, main thing is to reduce exposure as much as possible. Can't get rid of everything. Some of these things are just too damn convenient for us to get rid of, all right? But for the things that you can make a choice on, whether or not you're going to put something in a plastic container or a glass or Pyrex container, make the right choice, all right? That's the easy way, and make sure you've got good ventilation in your kitchen. That's another really easy way to actually kind of dilute out any toxic exposures that might come up. And by the way, you don't need a fancy commercial products to do cleaning. You can use plain old soap and water. They actually clean very, very effectively. Think about it. That's what surgeons use to clean their hands before operating. You can do it in your kitchen. You don't need complicated chemical formulations despite what the marketing says. All right? And by the way, if you want to check out your cleaning products that you're normally using, how they are chemically rated, what I recommend is you go to the Environmental Working Group, the EWG, go to their website, okay, and look for their list of toxic household cleaners. So you can just educate yourself, but then you can actually track whether or not something you have in the house, you want to toss it out and get something cleaner as a cleaner option. Next thing that you're going to actually encounter in the kitchen, kind of a toxin, is actually bacteria. Bacteria in a kitchen are bad news. E. coli, Salmonella, Campylobacter. These can contaminate foods and kitchen surfaces, especially when you've got raw ingredients involved. And by the way, do you know that the most bacterial-laden object in your whole house even worse than your toilet seat, can be your kitchen sponge, your dish sponge, all right? That's really important because these sponges can grow bacteria, they stay moist, they trap food residues, all right? And they're sitting there for weeks or months, and they rarely get cleaned, all right? All this makes the kitchen sponge an ideal environment for bacteria to grow. So, here's what I want you to remember. A good rule of thumb is to try to replace your kitchen sponge every week. And if you don't want to replace it because you know you're you're on a budget, throw it in the dishwasher and wash it carefully in your dishwasher. All right? Cutting boards are another source of bacterial growth. Think about it. Your cutting board's got all kinds of grooves from repeated uses. And these small cuts in the cutting board trap bacteria, especially when you're cutting raw meat or seafood. To prevent bacteria from growing on a cutting board, what you want to do is wash it thoroughly with soap and water. Scrub those surfaces really well. Then let them dry completely between uses. Again, for a cutting board, choose wood, not plastic. Wood actually has natural antimicrobial properties. It's kind of like kills bacteria all by itself. And one more tip again, get 2 cutting boards if you want to actually keep things really safe. One for meat and seafood, the other one for your fruits and vegetables. That way, you're not cross-contaminating. All right, when you step back, I just told you that your kitchen isn't just a place where you're preparing food. It's a place where the environment that you choose in it can shape what your body is exposed to every day. If you're not careful, you could be exposed to toxins that you didn't even know existed. Microplastics, heavy metals, chemical toxins, harmful bacteria, different types of exposure, but they all actually cause chronic inflammation, and they can affect your gut health, your gut microbiome as well. So, making a few choices to reduce the exposures. You don't have to eliminate everything, just reduce it wherever you can. That is a very realistic solution where you can make your kitchen the best place where you can make moves for your health. The goal is not to place everything you have. The goal is to reduce your exposures, all right? Now, as often occurs, the most important changes that need to be made when it comes to your health are the ones that are hiding in plain sight. So, if you want to understand what's really happening in your kitchen and in your body today and how you can protect your body, make sure you subscribe to my channel because I'll keep breaking it down for you right here and show you what you can do to be healthier every single day. I'll see you in the next video. Hey, if you like that video, then you're going to love this one. Check it out.